The reunion dinner at Luca's was my idea of hell wrapped in white tablecloths. I sat at the far end of a table designed for 12, watching my former colleagues order drinks that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The restaurant hummed with that particular energy of people who belonged: low laughter, confident voices, the clink of expensive glassware. Greg, my ex-husband, sat 3 seats down with his new girlfriend. Younger, obviously. Prettier, probably. He'd brought her specifically to make a point. Tanya, my former best friend and current director at the firm that laid me off, held court at the head of the table. Mr. Reynolds, the boss who'd called me into his office 6 months ago to deliver the news about restructuring, raised his glass. "To Amara," he announced, voice dripping with performative kindness. "Who's brave enough to start over at 40, following her passion? Opening a little restaurant or something?" "Food truck," I corrected quietly. Tanya's laugh cut through the murmur. "At 40? Honey, midlife crises don't come with aprons." The table erupted. Greg smirked into his scotch. Someone pulled out a phone to record the moment. Because humiliation wasn't real anymore unless it was documented. I smiled, nodded, pretended the shame wasn't coating my throat like poison. But inside, I made a promise that would take 5 years to keep. My sister's guest room had become my entire world. Twin bed, borrowed dresser, one window overlooking a parking lot. At 40 years old, I'd regressed to teenager status, asking permission to use the kitchen, keeping my belongings confined to a single closet, apologizing for existing. The landlord's final notice for my old apartment sat on the nightstand. 3 days to pay 2 months back rent or lose my security deposit. I'd already lost the apartment. Now I was just negotiating the terms of surrender. My phone showed my bank balance, $6,482. Everything left after. The divorce, the layoff, the desperate months of applying to jobs that never called back. 40 felt like a cliff. I'd walked off without realizing there was no ground beneath me. I pulled out the one thing I'd rescued from my grandmother's house after she died, a spiral-bound notebook, pages yellowed and stained. Her recipes, written in shaky cursive: gumbo, cornbread, peach cobbler. Foods that tasted like memory. On the inside cover, she'd written, "Feed them what the world forgot." I'd read that line 100 times without understanding it. Tonight, for the first time, it felt like an answer instead of a question. The food truck was a disaster on wheels, borrowed from my sister's neighbor, who'd used it for a failed taco business. The equipment was ancient, the paint was peeling, and the whole thing smelled faintly of old grease and crushed dreams. Perfect for my situation. I spent 3 days cleaning, repainting, troubleshooting a temperamental stove, named it Amara's Soul Bowl, printed cheap vinyl decals with money I couldn't afford to spend. My sister watched from her porch, arms crossed, expression torn between support and concern. "You sure about this?" she asked. "No," I admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." Opening day was a Thursday in October. I parked near the community college, figuring hungry students were my demographic. Made my grandmother's gumbo the recipe I could cook in my sleep, the one that tasted like her kitchen on Sunday afternoons. 3 hours in, the stove caught fire. Small flames, easily extinguished, but enough to draw attention. A police officer approached, inspected my equipment, and shut me down for code violations. Improper ventilation, outdated fire suppression, a list of problems that would cost thousands to fix. I sat on the curb watching him write citations, feeling the last of my hope leak away like smoke. The video appeared online that night. Someone had filmed the fire, the police shut down, my face as I read the citations. Tanya had shared it with the caption, "Dreams taste better burnt." 300 likes, 80 shares. Comments ranged from sympathetic to cruel, but they all said the same thing. I'd been foolish to try. 40 was too old. Food trucks were oversaturated. I should have stayed in my lane. I didn't cry. Couldn't afford the luxury. Just sat in my sister's guest room calculating how much the repairs would cost versus how much I had left. The math was brutal. Fixing the truck meant burning through my entire savings with no guarantee of success. My phone buzzed. A text from Greg. "Saw the video. This is exactly why I tried to talk sense into you. Some people aren't meant to be entrepreneurs." I blocked his number. Then I pulled out my grandmother's notebook again and started planning. Not because I was confident, because giving up felt like dying, and I wasn't ready for that yet. I spent 2 weeks getting the truck legal new ventilation system, updated fire extinguisher, passing 3 separate inspections, drained my savings to $4,300, reopened on a rainy Tuesday that promised 0 customers. By 9 p.m., I'd sold exactly 12 bowls, not nearly enough to cover costs. I was packing up when an older man approached, weathered face, torn jacket, shopping cart full of belongings. Homeless, clearly. My first instinct was to tell him I was closed. Instead, I asked, "You hungry?" He nodded. I made him gumbo the last serving, extra cornbread. He ate slowly, savoring each bite. When he finished, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Tastes like home," he said simply, "like somebody loves you." Something in my chest cracked open. "What's your name?" "Leo." "Come back tomorrow, Leo. Eat free. Every day if you want." He studied me carefully. "Why?" "Because somebody has to remember what food is actually for." That moment, Leo's gratitude, his tears, the reminder that feeding people mattered saved me. Not financially, but spiritually, which turned out to be more important. The turnaround started with a blog post I didn't know existed. A college student named Maya had stopped by the truck, tried the gumbo, and written a review on her food blog. "The truck that feeds your soul, Amara's bowl serves more than food." Her post went semi-viral in local foodie circles. Suddenly, people were showing up specifically to try the gumbo from that blog post. Lines formed. Social media posts multiplied. Within a week, I was selling out daily. The attention felt surreal. I'd spent months invisible, and now people were photographing their meals, tagging me, spreading word organically. My grandmother's recipes, the ones I'd cooked my whole life without thinking they were special, became the thing people craved. Revenue jumped. I hired an assistant, a culinary student named Jordan who worked for minimum wage and leftovers. We developed a rhythm prep in the morning, serve through lunch and dinner, clean until midnight, exhausting, exhilarating, proof that maybe I hadn't been delusional after all. Then the anonymous complaint arrived. Health department inspection, citing concerns about food storage and preparation. The inspector was thorough but fair, found minor violations, gave me 2 weeks to correct them. Not devastating, but expensive and time-consuming. I checked the complaint origin. Filed digitally. Email trace led back to an IP address registered to Tanya's marketing firm. I could have confronted her, could have posted screenshots, exposed her pettiness, weaponized social media the way she'd weaponized it against me. Instead, I fixed every violation. Then I went further, upgraded equipment beyond code requirements, got additional certifications, hired a food safety consultant. When the follow-up inspection came, I passed with perfect marks. Posted the results publicly with a simple caption: "Transparency builds trust. Here's our health inspection report. We're proud of what we serve." The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers appreciated the honesty. Other food trucks asked for advice. A local news segment featured me as an example of doing business right. Tanya's attempted sabotage had backfired, giving me credibility I couldn't have manufactured. I never mentioned her involvement. Silence, I was learning, made a better weapon than accusations. Business doubled again. I started catering small events, birthday parties, office lunches, community gatherings. Each job led to 3 more. Money stopped being a daily panic and became merely a constant worry. Progress. 6 months after nearly giving up, I was profitable, not wealthy, but surviving, which felt like a miracle. Greg appeared on a Wednesday afternoon, wearing the smile he'd used during our marriage when he wanted something. "Heard you're doing well," he said, leaning against my truck like we were old friends. "I'm managing." More than managing from what I hear, catering, contracts, media attention. "You've built something impressive, Amara." I kept chopping vegetables, not trusting wherever this was headed. "What do you want, Greg?" "To help. You're good with food, but business management isn't your strength. I could consult, help you scale properly. Connections in the restaurant industry, financial planning, that sort of thing." The audacity was breathtaking. "You mean the connections you spent our entire marriage telling me were wasted on my little cooking hobby?" "I was wrong about that. I'm trying to make amends by supporting you now." "I don't need your support. I needed it when we were married and I was drowning. Now I'm swimming fine without you." His expression hardened. "You always were too proud to accept help." "I'm not too proud. I'm just smart enough not to trust people who only show up after the hard work is done." He left angry. I felt shaky but vindicated. The old me would have doubted myself, wondered if he was right. The new me knew. Better. The investor found me through Instagram. Gerald Patterson, owner of 3 successful restaurant chains. He wanted to meet, discuss expansion opportunities. We had coffee. He offered $80,000 to open a brick-and-mortar location, with one condition: rename it Patterson's Soul Kitchen. "Your grandmother's name doesn't have brand recognition," he explained. "Mine does. Think about the doors that opens." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, you're turning down $80,000? I'm turning down erasing my grandmother from something she inspired. The name isn't negotiable." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But that night, I posted about the offer and my refusal on social media. Some dreams aren't for sale. Amara's soul bowl stays Amara's soul bowl. The post went viral in my niche community. Hundreds of messages supporting the decision. Media outlets reached out. The publicity from turning down money turned out to be worth more than the money itself. 2 weeks later, a different investor contacted me, one who respected my terms. We started negotiations. Slower, more careful, but on my conditions. Jordan, my assistant, quit via text. "Sorry, got a better offer." "Good luck." I was confused until I checked my recipes folder, the digital files where I documented my grandmother's recipes with my own modifications. Half of them had been accessed and copied 3 days before Jordan quit. Traced the leak through our shared server. Files sent to an outside email address. That address belonged to Tanya's marketing firm. Jordan had been bribed to steal recipes. The betrayal stung, but I'd learned something important over the past year: authenticity can't be replicated. Tanya could have my recipes, but she couldn't have the decades of muscle memory, the intuition, the love that made them work. Within a month, I heard through the grapevine that Tanya had launched a catering division using traditional Southern recipes. Reviews were mediocre. Tastes manufactured. One blogger wrote, like someone following instructions without understanding the heart of the dish. Customers started noticing too. Comments on her posts asking, "Is this like Amara's soul bowl?" She'd tried to copy me and ended up promoting me instead. I didn't gloat, just kept cooking. Let quality speak louder than accusations. The hurricane hit in late September. Warnings gave me time to secure the truck, but not enough to prevent damage. Wind ripped off the service window, rain flooded the interior. When I assessed the destruction the next morning, I wanted to scream. Insurance covered almost nothing, hadn't paid for comprehensive coverage because I couldn't afford it. Repairs would cost at least $15,000. I had maybe $8,000 saved. The math didn't work. I posted a photo of the damage, not asking for help, just documenting reality. Mother Nature had other plans, figuring out next steps. What happened next surprised me completely. Customers started a crowdfunding campaign without asking permission. Help Amara rebuild the soul bowl. Shared it across social media, local news picked it up, donations poured in. Within a week, $12,300. From people I'd fed, people who'd never eaten my food but supported the story, people who believed in second chances. I cried reading the messages. "You fed my family when we couldn't afford anything else. Your food got me through my divorce. You deserve this." I'd thought I was building a business. Turned out I'd built a community that mattered more than money. Mrs. Alvarez appeared one afternoon after I'd reopened the truck. Elegant woman in her 70s, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd commanded kitchens for decades. She ordered gumbo, ate thoughtfully, then asked to speak with me. "I owned 3 restaurants before I retired," she said. "Watched you from the beginning. You have talent, but talent only takes you so far. May I offer advice?" I nodded, half expecting criticism. Instead, she became my unofficial mentor. Taught me about licensing, trademarking recipes, business structures, protecting intellectual property. Introduced me to her lawyer, her accountant, her network of retired restaurateurs who remembered what it meant to build something from nothing. "Why are you helping me?" I asked after our 3rd meeting. "Because I see myself in you 30 years ago. Someone gave me a chance. I'm passing it forward. With Mrs. Alvarez's guidance, I incorporated properly, trademarked Amara's Soul Bowl, established legal protections I hadn't known existed. Growth became intentional instead of chaotic. I hired properly, paid fairly, built infrastructure that could scale. 6 months after the hurricane, I had 3 trucks, 8 employees, and a waiting list for catering. Not massive success, but sustainable, protected, professional. The Regional Food Expo felt like entering a different world. Professional chefs, restaurant owners, food industry executives. I was a food truck operator with a high school education, competing against culinary school graduates with Michelin experience. My entry was simple: my grandmother's gumbo, cornbread, peach cobbler, comfort food executed perfectly. Nothing fancy, nothing innovative by industry standards, just honest. The judges tasted anonymously, deliberated for hours. When they announced winners, I barely heard my name. Best local cuisine, Amara's Soul Bowl. The room erupted. People I didn't know congratulated me. Media asked for interviews. In the back of the crowd, I spotted Tanya. Her face had gone carefully blank, but her eyes screamed fury. Our gazes met across the room. I smiled, not gloating, just acknowledging. She'd spent a year trying to bury me, and here I was, winning awards she'd never achieve. The photo from that moment, me holding the award, Tanya visible behind me looking stunned, went viral on local food blogs. From food truck to first place became the narrative. I didn't correct anyone who assumed it was an overnight success. Let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth. 5 years of humiliation, failure, rebuilding. Nothing overnight about it. The call came from a commercial real estate broker I'd met months earlier at a networking event. His voice carried barely contained excitement. "Amara, are you sitting down? Should I be? Luca's is going bankrupt. Investors are pulling out. The building's going up for sale. $470,000. My breath stopped. Luca's. The restaurant where I'd been humiliated, where my former life had toasted my failures while ordering $30 entrees. The symbol of everything I wasn't polished, exclusive, untouchable. Why are you telling me? Because you asked me 6 months ago to let you know if any established restaurants became available. This is the best location in the city. The kitchen equipment alone is worth $200,000. It's a steal if you can move fast. Could I move fast? I had maybe $40,000 in liquid assets. The rest was tied up in trucks, equipment, inventory. A $470,000 purchase was insane. Give me 24 hours. I called Mrs. Alvarez, explained the situation, the impossibility, the desperate want underneath the logic. She listened without interrupting. How much can you put down? Maybe $50,000 if I liquidate carefully. I'll co-sign the loan. You've proven yourself. Let's make this happen. The bank meeting felt surreal. Me, in my cleanest jeans and a borrowed blazer, sitting across from a loan officer reviewing my financials, food truck revenue, catering contracts, award certificates, social media analytics showing engagement and growth. Your business model is unconventional, the officer said carefully. It's proven, I countered. 3 years of consistent growth, 0 debt, multiple revenue streams. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a business loan based on demonstrated success. Mrs. Alvarez added her endorsement, her reputation, her collateral, her faith. The officer reviewed documents for what felt like hours. Finally, we can offer $375,000 at 6%. You'd need to cover the difference. I did the math. Sell 1 truck, liquidate savings, take a small personal loan. Possible. Barely. I'll make it work. Paperwork took 2 weeks. During that time, I learned details that made the purchase even sweeter. Tanya's husband, Marcus, was one of Luca's investors. They were desperate to sell before total collapse. My offer backed by a bank loan and Mrs. Alvarez's reputation was their only viable option. The day I signed, Marcus's signature appeared on the seller's documents. He had no idea he was selling to me. The broker had kept my identity confidential until the deal closed. The irony tasted better than anything I'd ever cooked. Standing outside Luca's with keys in my hand felt like stepping into an alternate timeline. 5 years ago, I'd sat inside as a joke. Now I owned it. Every table, every chair, every inch of kitchen space. The building needed work. The previous owners had let maintenance slide during their financial death spiral, but the bones were good. Location was perfect. And the name recognition even associated with bankruptcy was valuable. I didn't want to keep the name Luca's. That belonged to their failure. I wanted something that honored where I'd come from. Amara's table. My grandmother's legacy, elevated. A place where people came not just for food, but for belonging. The rebrand took 3 months. Renovation, hiring, menu development, marketing. I kept the food truck business running parallel, couldn't afford to lose that revenue stream yet. Worked 20-hour days, lived on 4 hours of sleep, survived on stubbornness and Mrs. Alvarez's occasional pep talks. The new slogan appeared on marketing materials, where laughter turns to lessons. People who knew the backstory appreciated the subtext. People who didn't just thought it sounded welcoming. Either way, it was true. The soft opening was invitation only. 50 guests, mostly food industry people, media, community supporters, and one table booked under a corporate account reserved weeks in advance by what I later learned was the Friday Club, my old work group's standing dinner reservation. They arrived in expensive clothes, loud voices, that same energy of people who belonged. I watched from the kitchen as they settled in, ordered wine, laughed at inside jokes. They had no idea who owned the restaurant. The marketing had been deliberately vague, under new management. Elevated comfort cuisine. Tanya sat at the head of the table. Greg beside her, apparently they'd stayed friendly after my exit from both their lives. Mr. Reynolds, now retired, held court telling stories. The same people who'd toasted my failures 5 years ago gathered again in the same space, unaware the punchline had changed. I let them order, let them eat appetizers, let them relax into the assumption that this was their space, their domain. Then I walked out of the kitchen in chef's whites, carrying their entrees personally. The moment they recognized me was electric. Forks froze mid-air, conversations died. Tanya's face went through confusion, recognition, horror. Greg looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Good evening," I said pleasantly. "Welcome to Amara's table. I'm the owner. Thank you for dining with us tonight." Tanya recovered first, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Amara, what a surprise. You work here?" "I own here," I corrected gently. "Purchased it 3 months ago. Tonight's our soft opening." "Mr." Reynolds cleared his throat. "Congratulations. That's quite an achievement." Greg said nothing, staring at his plate like it might offer escape. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how I'd gone from burned food truck to owning the restaurant he'd brought dates to for years. "Thank you all for coming," I continued. "Your meals tonight are complimentary. Consider it my way of saying thank you for inspiring me to prove everyone wrong." The statement landed with surgical precision. Not overtly hostile, but clear enough that everyone understood. I'd won. They'd lost, and I was gracious enough not to rub it in, which somehow made the victory more complete. A guest at a nearby table had recorded the exchange. By midnight, the video was online. Woman surprises former colleagues who mocked her at restaurant she now owns. Within hours, hundreds of thousands of views. By morning, millions. The comments were unanimously supportive. This is what revenge looks like when you succeed instead of staying bitter. She served them humble pie and they didn't even know until dessert. I didn't comment on any of it. Just kept working. The viral video changed everything. Media, requests flooded in. From food truck to fine dining, how one woman rebuilt her life. Fired at 40, now feeds the city. The restaurant owner who turned mockery into Michelin-worthy meals. The narratives weren't quite accurate, we weren't Michelin level, and fine dining wasn't really my style. But the story resonated. Underdog makes good. Middle-aged woman refuses to accept society's timeline. Revenge served with cornbread. Reservations filled 6 weeks out. We went from soft opening to grand opening to constantly fully booked within a month. I hired more staff, expanded hours, added brunch service. Revenue exceeded projections. Investors who'd ignored me now wanted meetings. The business success felt surreal. But what meant more were the messages from other people starting over. "You inspired me to try again after my divorce." "I'm 53 and starting a business because of your story." Thank you for proving it's never too late. I'd set out to rebuild my own life. Accidentally became a symbol for everyone who'd been told they were past their expiration date. The responsibility felt heavy but meaningful. Tanya, meanwhile, was experiencing the opposite trajectory. Her catering division, the one built on stolen recipes, collapsed under scrutiny after the video went viral. Clients canceled. Her company announced restructuring. Within 3 months, she'd been quietly let go. I didn't celebrate her downfall, just noted it and moved on. The cease and desist letter arrived via certified mail. Tanya's lawyers claimed I'd stolen proprietary recipes she'd developed, demanded I stop using them or face litigation for theft of intellectual property. I called Mrs. Alvarez, then my lawyer. We reviewed documentation. I had my grandmother's original notebook dated, weathered, clearly decades old. I had trademark certificates filed before Tanya's catering launch. I had timestamps on social media posts showing my recipes predated hers by years. My lawyer drafted a response, polite but firm, including copies of all documentation, suggesting that if anyone had stolen recipes, it was Tanya via my former assistant, offering to settle this quietly or publicly, her choice. She dropped the case immediately, but the damage to her reputation was done. Industry blogs picked up the story. Failed entrepreneur attempts to sue successful chef for using her own grandmother's recipes. The optics were devastating. Tanya's company folded entirely 2 months later. I heard through mutual contacts that she'd moved to another state, trying to rebuild far from the wreckage. I felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction. Not sympathy. Just the distant acknowledgement that karma had handled what I couldn't. Mr. Reynolds appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, asking to speak with the owner about a corporate catering proposal. My host seated him in my office without realizing the connection. When I walked in, his expressions cycled through surprise, embarrassment, forced professionalism. Amara, I didn't realize you were, well, the owner? Yes. I sat across from him. You mentioned a catering proposal? He fumbled with a folder, clearly off balance. My consulting firm has quarterly events. 50 to 75 people. We're looking for a new caterer. Someone mentioned Amara's table had excellent reviews. We do. What kind of cuisine are you interested in? He went through his pitch budget, frequency, menu preferences, professional, impersonal, like we didn't have history, like he hadn't fired me 5 years ago and toasted my failures at a reunion dinner. I listened patiently. When he finished, I said, "That's a generous contract. Thank you for considering us." "So you'll do it?" "No." He blinked. "No, no. We're fully booked with clients who've supported us from the beginning. I prefer to honor those relationships over taking on new contracts, especially from companies that didn't believe in me when it mattered. This is about me. Firing you. This is about me choosing integrity over opportunity. There's a difference. A journalist at the next table having lunch, not eavesdropping intentionally overheard enough to piece together context. The next morning, the headline read, "Boss who fired her at 40 now pitches catering deal to her restaurant. She says no." The article went viral in business circles. Not as big as the original video, but significant. Framed as an example of principled business decisions and knowing your worth. I was invited to speak at entrepreneurship conferences, women's leadership panels, culinary industry events. Public speaking terrified me, but I forced myself to do it. Told my story honestly, the failures, the humiliation, the slow rebuild. Emphasized that success wasn't linear, that 40 wasn't too late, that revenge was optional, proving yourself was mandatory. The speaking fees helped, but more valuable were the connections. Other business owners, potential collaborators, people who'd walked similar paths. I learned I wasn't alone in starting over midlife, wasn't alone in facing mockery, wasn't alone in doubting whether the struggle was worth it. My story resonated because it was common. I'd just been public about it. 6 months after the Mr. Reynolds article, he reached out personally via email. No pitch, just an apology. I was wrong to fire you the way I did, wrong to belittle your dreams. I'm genuinely proud of what you've built. Not asking for anything, just wanted you to know. I read it 3 times. Felt something loosen in my chest. Wrote back, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Forgiveness, I learned, wasn't weakness. It was just deciding not to carry weight that didn't serve me anymore. Tanya appeared at the restaurant on a Thursday evening, no reservation, asking to speak with me. The host buzzed the kitchen. I considered refusing. Then curiosity won. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. The confidence that used to radiate from her had dimmed to something uncertain. We sat in a quiet corner booth away from other diners. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. "For everything. The mockery, the sabotage, the lawsuit, all of it. I was threatened by your success and tried to drag you down instead of dealing with my own failures." I waited, not trusting easy apologies. "I'm not asking for a job or favors," she continued. "I'm leaving the city, starting over somewhere no one knows me. I just wanted to apologize in person before I go. Why now? Because I spent 5 years being the villain in someone else's success story, and I'm tired of it. I want to be better, even if it's too late." I studied her, saw genuine remorse. Also saw the same brokenness I'd felt sitting in my sister's guest room. It's not too late. It's just hard. Harder than I thought. Everything worth doing is... I bought her dinner. We didn't become friends. Didn't exchange numbers or promise to stay in touch. Just shared. A meal her eating what I'd cooked, me watching someone else struggle with starting over. When she left, I felt lighter. Not because I'd forgiven her. Because I'd stopped needing to hold on to what she'd done. The national award caught me completely off guard. Women Reinventing the Culinary Industry. A recognition by the National Restaurant Association, highlighting 10 women who'd transformed their careers and communities through food. The ceremony was in Chicago. Black tie. Intimidating? I brought my sister and Mrs. Alvarez as my guests. Felt like an imposter surrounded by celebrity chefs and James Beard winners. But when they called my name, I walked to that stage and accepted the award with trembling hands. My speech was simple. 5 years ago, my ex-husband, my former boss, and my best friend laughed when I said I'd start over. They thought 40 was too late, that a food truck was too small, that my dreams were delusions. They laughed when I said I'd start over. I'm still laughing, just from a better table. The room erupted, standing ovation, cameras flashing. In the audience, I saw women crying, some my age, some older, all carrying stories about being told they were too late, too old, too unrealistic. The speech went viral. I'm still laughing, just from a better table became a meme, a motivational quote, a rallying cry for everyone starting over past society's preferred timeline. I didn't set out to be inspirational, just refused to be defeated. Turned out that was inspiration enough. Tea. 1 year after buying the restaurant, I sat in the back corner booth during a rare quiet moment. Early afternoon, between lunch and dinner rush. The space hummed with prep work, sous chefs chopping, line cooks organizing stations, servers rolling silverware. Leo, the homeless man who'd told me my gumbo tasted like home, now worked as my head server. I'd hired him 8 months ago, helped him find housing, watched him rebuild his life the same way I'd rebuilt mine. Tonight, he'd serve his 100th table. Small milestone, enormous meaning. Through the window, I could see people walking past, reading the menu posted outside, deciding whether to make reservations. Some knew the backstory. Most didn't. They just wanted good food in a welcoming space, which was exactly what I'd set out to create. My phone buzzed. Text from Maya, the blogger whose original review had launched everything. 5-year anniversary of my first Soul Bowl post. Want to do a follow-up piece? I smiled. 5 years. From food truck fire to award-winning restaurant owner, from punchline to proof, from 40 and afraid to 45 and thriving. I thought about the people who'd mocked me. Greg, who'd said I couldn't keep anything simmering. Tanya, who'd called me a midlife crisis in an apron. Mr. Reynolds, who'd suggested I was brave but foolish. They'd meant to crush me. Instead, they'd given me fuel. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, about refusing to accept someone else's timeline for my worth, about building something meaningful from failure and stubbornness and grandmother's recipes scribbled in the margins of an old notebook. I whispered to her memory wherever it lived, "They laughed, Grandma," and I fed them anyway. The kitchen timer dinged. Prep finished, dinner service starting soon. I stood, smoothed my apron, and walked back to work. There were meals to cook, people to feed, a community to serve. And tomorrow, I'd do it all again. Not because I had something to prove, because I'd already proven it. The table was mine now. Every single seat.